Hey everybody, I'm Nick with Aztec Tents, and today we're back out doing a video install of the 44 by 83 Tidewater tent. All right, we're going to touch on some personal protective equipment. We've got our hard hats today, our safety glasses, safety vest, some gloves, hearing protection, and steel-toe boots. All right, so for equipment today, we're working with our side poles. We've got our center poles, including bottoms, top sections, and then two different size midsections for our king and queen height poles. We've got our stakes, ratchet straps, flag poles and flags, our marking equipment, including our Tidewater marking jig, some wood grain pole sleeves for all of our poles, as well as our tops, drop cloths, and some stake driving equipment. Okay, to start, we're going to go through a brief explanation of how the Tidewater queen and king height midsections work. So for starters, you have your queen height ends that can be used as a 44 by 43, or you can then expand it to what we're building today, a 44 by 83, using the queen king left and queen king right. And these are designed to mate up to your queen height ends and then peak 3 feet higher on the 44 wide to a king height middle. So if we wanted to expand it an additional 20 feet to a 44 by 103, we use our king midsection. And if we opted to build a 44 by 63, we have a queen midsection for that. And you can also expand this with just queen height midsections if you choose. So you would use another queen to queen midsection here for 44 by 83, so on and so forth. So our first step in the process of installing this tent is going to be marking out on the ground where all of our poles, where all of our stakes are going to land. For that process, we square the tent, and if you need more information on how to do that properly, you can reference a couple of videos that we've put together on how to do that. We have a video on marking out a rectangular tent, as well as a video specifically designed for marking out a Tidewater tent. So let's get started. Okay, now that we've properly marked all of our side pole and stake locations, we're going to split up into two teams. Our first team is going to go out dropping stakes and ratchet straps in place and get started on driving those stakes into the ground. And our second team is going to work on getting drop cloths in place, our tent tops on the ground, and then we'll begin lacing. Let's get started. All right, we've got all of our stakes in place and our tent tops down on top of our drop cloths. So you see behind me, starting over here, we have our 44 wide lace end first. Second in line is going to be our 44 by 20 queen king left. Next in line is the 44 by 20 queen king right. And then lastly is our grommet 44 wide end. So we're going to start with our flag poles being inserted into the peak of both sections to get them started, and then we'll work down our lace line and then do our rain flap Velcro connection over the top of that afterwards. So we'll show a closer look at that once we get going. All right, we've got our tent tops laced with our flagpoles in place. Our next step is we're going to be staging all of our side poles around the perimeter of the tent. We'll stage our center poles in place. We'll get our ratchet straps attached and prepped. Once everything's in place, we'll show you how to use our Tidewater install straps on each end of the tent, and then we'll start raising side poles. All right, so we've got all of our side poles distributed, ratchet straps attached. Now we're going to install our Tidewater install straps on each end of the tent to make sure the tent doesn't rotate upon install of our side poles. And we're going to start pushing our side poles to create a bowl. Then from there we'll move on to pushing center poles. All right, as you can see behind me, we've got our side poles in and all of our jumper ropes tied off, just in case we get a gust of wind. None of those poles are going to fall out of the tent top. So our next step is going to be taking in our center poles, and our first one is going to go in right on our hip end here. And we're going to go about halfway, and that's going to start to lift our tent top off the ground. So we're going to get it just off the ground enough to where our next pole is going to go in. And again, we'll go in about halfway with that one until the final center pole goes in. We'll go all the way up and then finish the previous two. Let's go. All right, as you can see behind me, we've got our center poles in. So once the center poles go up, everything's going to be very loose. The tent's probably going to be leaning one way or the other. So the first step is to straighten those center poles as best as you can. And then you'll start working on tensioning out your lace lines. Then you'll tension out your hip ends and then everything in between. Try and have installers working opposing each other so they're not pulling the tent one way and then the other, just stretching it to its final dimension at the same time. All right, well that concludes our install of the 44x83 Tidewater sailcloth tent. If you've got any further questions, don't hesitate to reach out through our website. We have plenty of client resources there as well with diagrams. You'll be able to find this video there as well. If you've got any questions on how to tear down, just play this video in reverse.